Hello. Welcome to
Hello.
The Future is a Mixtape.
Hello.
I'm Jesse.
I'm Matt.
And this week we learn about Matthew's childhood obsession with becoming a world-famous author.
And we learn about Jesse's 100% certainty that he would be the living embodiment of Robert Rauschenberg. And I don't know what happens to Robert Rauschenberg, but he becomes Robert Rauschenberg, the visual artist.
And we spend the hour debating celebrity.
And whether it should be in the poison pyramid.
Yeah. Should it be?
Should it be? I don't think so. I think that's for a deeper conversation later on.
Well, you decide. Take a listen and let us know. Exactly how famous did you want to be when you grew up? Like when you were younger, exactly how famous did you want to be?
I think fame started to enter in when I fell in love with writing and reading. So I thought I would be a great novelist. I was interested in novels, and I fell in love with poetry in high school. But really, I loved fantasy and science fiction, and so I thought I wanted to be a great writer, and I would be immortal. And I think part of the appeal for being famous wasn't signatures or a lot of skin rubbing, but
fans.
Skin rubbing or fans was just basically that you would be immortal, that you could grant yourself the seed of immortality.
Remember that word, immortal.
Immortal, yes. And one of the immortals, that you would have I remember even being in a psychology class where they asked us what we'd like to be known for, and I said something like, I would like to be known as something that carried with me a footprint to the future. And so that's something that's there, is that the idea that I want to be a great novelist and that people would continue to read me well after I was gone. So I think that's when I wanted fame.
So did you think you could become famous, or that you would become famous?
Well, I think...
How certain were you on this future?
Well, I think for me, it's certainly something that wasn't as easily imagined as it is now with the individualization of celebrity and the YouTube, the likes, the Facebook, the social networking.
So in the 90s, you had a 90s picture of...
It wasn't going to be an accident.
Portlandia picture of
and it wasn't going to be... Fame wasn't going to be an accident. I didn't even know about Andy Warhol's famous glib comment about that in the future everyone will have 50 minutes of fame. I just thought fame was something you had to earn. It wasn't something you just got. It wasn't because you're wealthy or anything like that. It was basically because you were just basically famous because you did something important. And for me, the stuff that I loved was reading and writing and books and novels and fantasy. And so I wanted to be famous for being a great writer. And to me, it felt like people who write words and make books, that they would be the ones that would be eternally immortal, not someone that did commercials for Nabisco or was an Olympic athlete, but someone that they would watch again. Because, in sports, people say, yeah, this is a legendary basketball player, but people don't watch basketball games from the 1970s.
So, I mean, if you're hardcore, you do. In the 1970s,
you're talking about super cranks and shit. Yeah, if you're in the 1970s. But, if you're one of the great ones, if you're Faulkner, if you're Toni Morrison,
right. You had this idea of immortality.
True immortality
of the author.
Was the author, right, exactly. Right. And then everything else, celebrity culture is a bygone word for something that's going to get replaced by other celebrities. But truly gifted writers, people that picked words apart and made beautiful skyscrapers or bridges out of them, that they would be remembered. So for me, the idea of being a celebrity or being famous was based on actual idea of that you were going to earn it. You were going to claim it through hard work and through talent.
Perfect. That's what you're supposed to think.
That was the original idea.
That's
Kim Kardashian porn video.
It's still part of the mythology.
Yeah, the traditional notion. And I think I want to talk about this wonderful little commentary.
Wait. Before you move on there. I know you want to get to this, but how certain were you? How certain were you when you met, like, what age are we talking?
I would say probably 14, 13.
Okay, right. Normal, perfect. Good timing.
Right when I was about to leave to leave the Mormon church. Right. It's interesting that was around the same time.
You needed to replace the Mormon church with
religion,
another idea of God.
Another religion, another mythology.
Right.
So I think that was when my father gave me the choice to leave the LDS, Latter-day Saint Mormon Church.
LDS, 14. That's right. I forgot that called the LDS.
Yeah, and so at around that time, I was falling in love with what I thought was of real consequence, which is the exploration of human emotions and feelings.
Right, but my question is, how certain were you that you were going to be famous?
30%.
All right, at 14, 15, You were 30% certain that you were going to be famous.
Yeah.
All right. Today, what's the percent? What's the likelihood
Well,
that Matthew's not? I mean, I'm not saying that you're not famous, but
well, given the fact that anyone,
I don't want to hurt your feelings.
my last Facebook post got 11 likes, so I'm going to scale this shit down. So no, I think the likelihood is really around 5%, if anything. Because
is it still a dream that you hold on to?
I think so. I mean, the fact that I think so, because I feel like when my kids get older, I'll start writing. I'll be one of these old ancient writers that I'll write something really great, like when somehow time opens up.
Ah, yeah. So you picked an avenue
because I'm in a field.
You picked an avenue of identity where the narrative allows for
being
late
older
in life.
Well, if I'm a musician, I'm done. Yeah, I mean, if I'm a musician, I'm done.
A Bukowski.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, and Jonathan Swift's best works were written in the last 10, 15 years of life, and the real remarkable writing that often happens really late, because it's a slow growing, late blooming kind of artistic field. Getting a style for writing takes a lot more time. And I think for most musicians, if you haven't had a major album by the age of 40, you're not going to make it. You're not going to be famous.
Fuck you.
Well, I mean, you want to go through the list? I mean,
I know.
I mean, James Murphy got fame really late 30s.
No, not late 30s, 32. And it's this anomaly. It's this like out of this world thing that he was so
aging hipster. He's 32 and he's an aging hipster.
So now he's in his 40s or whatever, right? I don't know if he's 50 yet, but his first big hit was when he was 32, and he was abnormally old.
Yeah,
it's just odd.
Well, and I don't say that this couldn't happen late. I mean, there's certainly, and I think in any form of expression, people can late bloom, and inventors too. There's an article on Rolling Stone about a guy that's developing a glass-based cellular, energy device that is basically glass-based and that will work better than lithium batteries. And he's invented this patent for it, and he's in his 70s. So you can be creative and dynamic older, but the general assumption for music is it's young.
Become a god.
Yeah, well, and I think because I think of myself as someone who loves to write and loves to read, that art form, that genre or medium, is one where you can be great when you're older. If I was a musician, I would have 0% pretense.
So you still worship at the altar of fame to some degree.
Sure, I think so.
Yeah. Well, I bring this up because what I want to get to, what I hope to bring up in the conversation here about celebrity is part of this poison pyramid, this third part of our series of bad ideas that shouldn't be part of the future.
If you put
it in the first episode was about religion, the second about capitalism. The capstone of this pyramid is celebrity. This was my idea that I offered to you, this set of three. And what I want to draw upon is the psychological components of it, really. This is really where the contemporary psychological, cultural conditions sort of orbit around this phenomenon of fame and celebrity. And it's really important, I think, to think critically and seriously about the psychological impacts of this idea of celebrity.
To make this fair, you have to fess up.
I know. So
fess up. And at what age
myself.
did you think you were going to be famous?
So I'm much more guilty of this than you.
Yeah.
Right. And it's probably why I'm much more concerned about this.
But we wanted to.
Is that I knew I was going to be famous. Knew. Absolute certainty.
100%?
100%.
What age?
I don't remember.
But to me,
around the same age, I think.
I think the fundamental thing, because we're Gen Xers, is that for us the idea of fame or celebrity was that you had to do something more memorable, sustaining, and important.
Right. There wasn't the option to just be Instagram famous or
no. There's no conception of that
because those things didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
But it was as a creative person, right? I'm an artist, a visual artist, and it also had to do with the remoteness of my upbringing, both in terms of isolation from the community, being in a Christian cult, but also
Jehovah's Witness.
but also just geographic. I grew up in Alaska, and there's always this sense of the real world being somewhere else. Not that Alaska's especially remote or removed from.
You literally pay extra for shipping. I mean, that's already conducive to living in Alaska. Everything is extra for shipping.
As far as talking about folks who grew up in the United States, it's pretty remote. I mean, Virgin Islands may, people who grew up there may feel similar, or in Hawaii may feel similar.
Do you think the geography of Alaska had an effect on that desire for fame? Like if you were in New Jersey or if you were in Seattle, would you have had this?
Yeah, well, there are a few books I want to mention that investigate celebrity and in different ways, and one of which is this book published in 1996 by the author David Shields called Remote Reflections on Life in the Shadow of Celebrity. It's more of an autobiographical piece, and he's a sort of collagist in the way that he writes. I really am in love with his writing. There's another.
He teaches at University of Washington.
Yeah, he's a professor at University of Washington. But he has this book that's I think is a really great piece, not as a critical piece about celebrity, but just as a personal reflection upon the impact of celebrity on one's life and the life of a writer.
Sexual identity, self-esteem, beauty.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't
autonomy.
go. It's not that type. It's not a memoir type of book at all.
It's deeply intellectual.
It's
straight ahead.
Yeah.
In terms of
well, just a couple.
concepts.
Right. You should read it. Because there's a couple. There are 2 chapters. I'm really into this, but you may not be. But the style of writing. But there are 2 chapters that are made up entirely. They're just collages that are made entirely of bumper sticker slogans.
Does he put them one on top of the other?
Yeah,
Or are those bumper stickers broken up into pieces themselves?
He tells a story with it. It's just pretty great, I think. Anyways, he talks about growing up on the West Coast and in the Northwest, and the isolation, the sense of isolation and psychological distance from this idea of the real world, right? That the placement of where the real world was in the culture for him at that time was the East Coast. And I identify with that to a great deal, and I identified with that, I should say, to a great deal growing up in a remote place like Alaska. You feel like you're not a real person, or I didn't feel like I was a real person. I didn't feel like I was a part of the real world. I felt like this was all something that happened on the screen, on the TV screen, in books, and
so was
it was so far away.
So this 100% feeling generated not on any particular moment, because I do remember you saying really late to me, I think we were at a LACMA museum, and maybe we saw a Robert Rauschenberg piece together, and you said Robert Rauschenberg was like the first great love in terms of visual arts.
I would never use those.
Well, I never say your first. You didn't say your first great love. No, I'm using that. Yeah. No, but you would never say something that emotionally melodramatic. But I'm saying,
well, because I was so removed from culture, but I was interested even at a young age in the arts and in making art and doing that with my life. I knew everything through books and magazines. I knew everything through Art Forum and Art in America.
So you actually never saw his physical combines?
I never saw anybody's work.
Oh, it was always through magazines. It's always said.
I didn't travel or anything either. I was part of a big family that was just always, vacations were.
So where were you getting these kind of postmodern art books from? Would you just order them yourself, or someone had them?
We had libraries and shit. So in the library,
you're talking about public libraries. This is before Ayn Rand. At public libraries.
Public libraries.
Yeah, before they came charter libraries.
I remember the tiny little public library in the town I grew up in was a pretty significant landmark.
Was it like a copy of Art Forum or Art in America, or was the
magazine? Yeah, and we'd get subscriptions to that. But so I knew from reproduction the work, and what I always say is that, and what I probably said to you was that I wanted to be Robert Rauschenberg. Not like Robert Rauschenberg. I didn't think of myself as someone who could also achieve the things that Robert Rauschenberg, who you could argue is one of the most or the most significant artist of the 20th century, at least in certain veins of work. I wanted to be him in his 60s, having already made this impact on the world. So
you wanted to exist in his body, kind of like the Disney movie where The Parent Trap, where you just switch bodies. Was that a fantasy that you would just be in the 60-year-old man's body?
No, you're still no.
Making combines.
You're still thinking of it in soft squishy, like you're a real human being terms. You gotta think of it like I don't think you have this dislocation that I feel or I felt and still feel and still informs me to this day. And I think it's there for you, but I don't think you recognize it. I think it's there for everyone.
Yeah.
But being under certain sets of circumstances can heighten certain parts of the experience of the world for individuals, right? And in this case, and for David Shields and his experience growing up, from my experience growing up in a remote place, certain things are heightened, right? This distance between me and the stars was heightened, right? And so what that distance means and what that means about my value as an individual, my self-worth, the possibilities for my own life.
So when you said you wanted
are much more heightened.
So when you said you wanted to be him at that age with that work already done, were you angry that you weren't him?
Yeah.
You felt like there was something unjust that I was living this life in Alaska with a wood chipper.
Yeah. Well, that I was, or that I was
in
even
Fargo. That has a different ending, but
that I was living a life.
Yeah.
And all its messy.
Yeah.
Not on the screen. Not like we do, and I still do to this day. Imagine my life as a movie.
Yeah. We were walking around once, and I was just stunned by this. And you mentioned a film term that escaped me, but the type of film shooting style where you're walking and the camera's following you. You said, I hate this feeling because I always have it. What's the film term you're using as a shooting style?
Oh, I don't recall, but
yeah, but
well,
when you walk around, sometimes I feel
maybe what I was talking about was the introspective moment in film. Yes,
exactly.
Right? Which is the close up on
the headshot,
the lead as they stare out into the distance, and ruminate.
Really, probably the most pinnacle kind of shot that makes Hollywood film is on the stage. You never got to see the face that close up. And so I think that enabled the notion of celebrity and fame is that intimate, mysterious
and
close-up.
Is also part, or that method is also part of the set of tools that push the workings of celebrity, which are putting yourself in their shoes, that you can imagine yourself being being this writer or that writer, who you admire or who the culture admires, right? You're supposed to be able to do that. Like that is part of the function, why fame is so useful in capitalism, right? Is because it's a vehicle for imagining a way out that you too can become famous.
It fits with the rags to riches story.
The rags to riches story, right? It's a sense like this wouldn't be such a important part of the culture and of the mythologies and the orthodoxy of neoliberalism of our world as it is, if there weren't tools like fame and celebrity to twist them, right? To really tweak our psychological sense of ourselves.
For me, of the three, like we said earlier, we're 100% certain capitalism has to go, and all manifestations of its disgusting, hydra-headed components. But we, once again, I'm more contentious about my belief on religion versus, the organized statist hierarchical version of religion versus spiritualism. For me, celebrity certainly is a massive problem. It really is. There's no doubt about it. But for me, my questioning of this in the pyramid, and one that maybe others might share, is that it's not systematically deep enough. And when you're talking about what's really going on, because us wanting us to be famous is also wanting us to just be loved in a general sense, and displacing that love. And instead of asking it from our family members or friends, we are asking for random people to love us in the way that we want to be loved by people that actually know us. And that's sad and depressing. But to me, what's really causing the harm, we have a biosphere collapse, is the fact that it's not just that us wanting to be a celebrity, but that's another escape hatch of what you could call the entertainment industrial complex or the virtual worlds complex, where we're spending huge amounts of time in these simulated worlds.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that the distractions of entertainment, right? You could say, right, the dislocation from reality that is propagated by distracting you with all of these shiny things and bright stars and empty, vacuous forms of entertainment.
And those
is
celebrities provide the narrative to keep those distractions going. To me, it's more the top layer than the bottom layer.
I understand that. But my assertion is that it's deeper than that. And it's deeper than that any of us really have grappled with yet, partly because it's so new. It's much newer than... I mean, certainly we have historical figures who are
well, I think
famous beyond belief.
The writer Ty Burr says that that Florence Lawrence, who was a star that was created by Carl Lumbly, the founder of Universal Studios, he did a kind of a stunt where he told this biograph actress that she had died in an accident, and everyone got upset. And when she appeared at the train station, she basically got mobbed. And later she committed suicide. Right. But she became the template for when you saw that stars could be formed from the silent era. And in the silent era, there was no star system, namely as a defense mechanism. So if they got famous, you wouldn't have to pay them more.
Right, early Hollywood used unknowns.
Interchangeables, because it was controlled costs and you didn't want anyone famous, and they didn't think it would have that big of effect anyways, but they just weren't even thinking about it. But when Mary Pickford came out and became a huge figure, she's the original America's sweetheart, and Reese Witherspoon, Meg Ryan, Sandra Bullock, the sweetheart girl, is a trope that comes back from Mary Pickford, and the silent era kind of created all of these tropes for what would then become celebrities attached to a kind of narrative trope. And with Mary Pickford, she was a global star. I mean, she was the first global star where literally, because of film, the delivery device allowed for these one individuals to be heightened. Right. I mean, I'm not saying that there weren't celebrities like, Dickens was a celebrity, but you didn't really think of him as an image. You thought of him as an author, as a mysterious, cloaking, walking, sauntering, writing, thinking author who you'd get these shipments from Bleak House that were serialized, and they come from the boats, and you'd pick them up, and you'd talk about them, and Dickens would get letters from people talking about the characters in Bleak House, and then it would influence his later serialization of this novel that was only put together as a novel later because it came out in these like packets, and there's a kind of participation with this. But Mary Pickford became this image that was just stained on to the global viewing public across the Atlantic.
Right, and she was part of the early formation of the star system. Right, in the Hollywood construction of the star system. There's a book called The Star System by Paul McDonald that has some great reflections on how that fit in with capitalism and how the creation of the star system became a way to encourage consumerism, right? Attaching products to these highly recognizable and idealized individuals.
Well, and
became a way to encourage consumption.
Absolutely, because advertising before that point was highly functionalistic. It was about how far the pantyhose stretches, how hot the coffee
how long the product will last, right? The integrity of the product,
durability and cost,
not the glamour of the product.
Associations, exactly.
And today, it's just absolutely part of everything, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you don't actually sell anything.
You don't sell Nikes by
people laugh
sort
at
of
you. Yeah, people laugh at you. I mean,
reason.
It could be a post-ironic version of a commercial.
You sell Nikes because you could be like Michael Jordan, or you could become like LeBron James.
Well, and it's a heat-seeking bomb versus just a bomb dropped from the air, and that's what advertising's become. It's kind of mirrored the military-industrial complex in terms of its accuracy with its technological tropes to the consciousness. So now when you do an advertisement, it's located within your feelings of inadequacy. And when you're selling pantyhose or soap, in the old days, you weren't selling it based on inadequacy.
Right. Well, and I think there was another point from this book, The Star System, that I think speaks more to what I wanted to get at, what I think is at the heart of why I put celebrity in this category of such...
In the poison pyramid.
Right, in the poison pyramid, is because celebrities then became ways that or became vehicles that mapped out monopolies of personality. And he talks in the book. He talks about how a celebrity creates a monopoly of certain type of personality, right? And for someone like myself, I recognize that very clearly. Like that seems very real to me, and has informed so much of my life that I don't know where I fit in the world.
Well, when you've dated people, did you think of them as movie tropes or archetypes?
No, there's also this weird. There's this. Obviously, this is we talked
femme
about
fatale or the sweetheart or the
don't. I think you don't get it twisted. We talked about this or mentioned this last week in the discussion about capitalism. This is mythologies, right? This isn't actually how the world is. This isn't actually how the universe is. This isn't an inherent thing in the universe.
These are man-made.
This is a man-made
constructions.
This is a system of culture, of civilization, and there's a weird disjunction between the imagined life, right? There's this distance between the imagined life, what I could become, what you could become, your ideal self as mapped upon the faces of this pantheon of gods, these immortal humans that walk among us.
It's a core sadness of being a human is when you're young, you have thousands of possible narratives for your life, imagined versions of yourself. And then as you get older, those doors keep closing down.
Well, and celebrities, famous people close off doors. You have to, if you're really
focused,
if you really reflect on the impact that this has, this is the problem. So there's a problem I have with the discussions about celebrity. I've always had, because this is what I did. I spent a lot of time, like in my graduate studies, thinking about this, and I'm making art that was dealing with these issues. And there's always this dismissiveness, right? Because the nature of celebrity is so fickle, especially in contemporary society. In contemporary America, it's so fickle. And like you mentioned a few, this sort of social media stars and being a star without any talent, just being famous for being famous, the Kardashian effect. So it is kind of grotesque, right? And clearly so. And so any like intelligent academic types really sort of dismissive of this. But I always found like also some of the folks who harbor the most desire around fame
are the ones that criticize it the most,
that are so dismissive of it as a phenomenon that impacts them and their lives and the lives of those around them.
Because they're philosophers or they're high art. They aspire to be part of the high art part of the hierarchy.
Right. That's also
the hierarchy of celebrity. There's actually an internal hierarchy of celebrity. So what we're talking about when we were growing up is you couldn't be a real celebrity in my mind growing up that was sustainable and valuable and intrinsically important if you didn't do something good or great or interesting.
Well, I don't know. Now, Donald Trump was famous even back then.
But he was a performance artist. I mean, he still is a performance artist. I mean, he's Kaufman without the sense of self-awareness. So he's always been a performance artist. Right. I mean, he really, if you look at the sales techniques, there's a magician in Las Vegas who's talking about he's just a really amazing presence in terms of selling something. And if you're aware of the mechanisms, it's horrible. But for people that aren't aware of the mechanisms, they're incredibly compelling and narcotic. And he's just entertaining. Even when you're aware of how bad his selling points are, the way he sets up things, the way he delivers things, that they're so artificial, but they're so bad that they're like Mystery Science 3000. They're just entertaining.
And I think this conversation may be a little like all over the place, but I think while you're mentioning Trump, this has to be the rise of Donald Trump and the election of Donald Trump as president of the United States has to be seen in some way as a reflection, a telling of how impactful celebrity is in our culture. He's president because he's America's most famous boss.
Well,
because he's a celebrity.
Yeah, I mean, as some columnists or pundits have said, that he's a poor man's idea of a rich man. And that's the part of the performance. in Manhattan, none of the billionaires like him at all. They think he's their white trash.
But it also should signal to you like how significant this is. This isn't like, oh, celebrity is just not. It's not that important. It's not a critical juncture for intellectual thought.
No,
it's deadly serious, right? This is deadly serious. We have Donald Trump as the president of the United States, and celebrity is a large part
is the sole reason for success.
Right.
Is his ability to entertain
He doesn't have
people.
any qualifications as a political
he is
leader.
If James Brown is like the godfather of so much kinds of music, like hip hop, he's often called the father of funk, but the godfather of hip hop. Well, Donald Trump is the godfather of troll and trolling culture. And that's why the alt-right and trolls and 4chan love him, because he's actually the embodiment of a troll. And the troll won the presidential. He rickrolled everyone through the election. I mean, rickrolled.
Puffy orange troll.
Exactly.
Circus peanut.
Mr. Marmalade trolled everyone all the way through the election. At each and every point, they said, no, this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen. This is going to end. This is going to end. He defied every expectation through the election cycle. And because he was so entertaining, and those clicks, getting those clicks, getting those bites, getting those reads, like Adam Curtis talks about, he's a click monster.
Well, and also all the imperfections, even those that are off the map, horrible, like the Billy Bush tape, it fits in this narrative, in this actually one of the most useful, systematically useful narratives about celebrity, which is this rags to riches story, or that this imperfection in our gods is a sign that you too have the opportunity to one day become one, right? So you can see yourself in, because everybody has messy lives. Like real life is messy. No one is as polished and perfect as Jennifer Aniston on the screen. But when you see imperfections,
it furthers the celebrity cult. I mean,
exactly.
I mean, this is what in this really fun little op-ed by Jake Halperin from NPR said about Tom and Katie when they were going to get engaged just before they fall out, and him jumping on couches and all of this. But, he has a little commentary called Zeus and Hera on NPR. And I'll read this clip because these imperfections have a lot to do with relatability.
Exactly.
The ancient Greek gods actually had a lot in common with our modern day Hollywood celebrities. Both sets of characters are seemingly perfect, ageless, beautiful, powerful uber beings who jet about having affairs, making enemies, and getting into loads of trouble. The Greek gods lived on the peaks of Mount Olympus, and in Hollywood, celebrities live, well, on the bluffs of Beverly Hills. The exploits of Greek gods were told in epic poems, and the exploits of Hollywood celebrities are retold in tabloids and glamour mags. The similarities are spooky, and in both cases, the central stories are just as lurid and tacky. Long before the media became obsessed with legendary womanizer like Errol Flynn or the annals of Greek mythology were detailing the sex romps of the all-powerful Zeus, who had more than 150 documented affairs, not quite as good as Wilt Chamberlain, but still impressive. The bottom line is that both Greek gods and Hollywood celebrities offer us a mythology, a common set of allegories, and even though we may worship these divine beings, and as much as we may covet their supernatural human qualities, I think we're deeply comforted by their foibles. We love the fact that they're so screwed up.
Yeah.
It gets us off the hook because it sets the bar so low for ourselves. If Zeus or even Tom Cruise can't hold down a stable relationship, well, it makes it easier for the little guy who may have similar issues.
Yeah.
It furthers the celebrity culture.
Said. Yeah.
And that's what we want from the celebrities, right? We want to know they're imperfect at some point.
Well, and you got to call out in there, that well-written passage, the reflections of religion. That celebrity phenomenon is really as we have been discussing with these things, born out of the columns of religion, right? It's very reflective of, and it is, like we mentioned in your case, moving from the LDS to the dream of becoming a famous writer, right? It is a replacement for religion. And just like these things in this column of this poison pyramid all promise a way out.
Yeah, escape hatches.
Escape hatches.
They're paths for worship, and they're the search for aspiring to something else that you don't have in your own life.
Right, and there's a really great book. If there's one I'd recommend on sort of critical thinking book on celebrity. It's a book by David Giles, is published in the early 2000s, called Illusions of Immortality. And he traces sort of the religious roots of celebrity and of fandom, and talks about all of these parallels, quite clear parallels with religious orthodoxy, both in the celebrity sort of system and in the practice of fandom. And even in sort of the rituals and community, like think of, I think it's in the book, he talks about even Star Trek fans, right? How that's sort of like a religion.
Well,
and function has a lot of the same sort of, or similarly modeled rituals, architectures of relationships.
belief systems.
And belief systems.
Belief circles almost.
Right.
And, DeLillo, the novelist DeLillo has a book called Mao 2. It's a novel. And it talks about really how that art and celebrity culture and entertainment culture offer their own kind of cults of worship. I mean, I jokingly told to a friend that I'd love to have a dystopian short story where people were killing each other because they couldn't understand what they were saying because they're quoting only lines from their TV shows. And
that's odd you say that, because that's how I felt in graduate school.
Well, I mean,
that's what I was doing with my work a lot, was like I was quoting these things that
they're internal,
part of this.
They're internal idiolects almost.
Yeah.
So I'm the Breaking Bad
that.
person. They're almost ethnic tribes.
Well,
these shows become my ethnic tribes.
Right, and that's also where the location of identity happens. Right, that's about also this location of identity and how, because they're real people, and this is part of why it's so powerful, I think, and holds such a sway over us, is they're not some fanciful beings that
Sky Daddy that I have no idea. I never get to hug him.
Right.
Yeah, they're people that I can relate to.
Shape. They're real people that you can really easily imagine yourself
who do amazing things, but also are fucked up. And I think that the fact that people go to church and go to religion, that they actually spend more time watching TV than they probably read the Bible. So I mean, on average, Americans watch 20 hours of TV a week or something equivalent to that. So TV watching, even emergent of all of the technological changes, video games, Americans still watch a lot of TV.
And 5 to 8 hours a day on your phone.
10 hours staring at a screen of some sort.
Right. Which, we could talk all about how this has become even more heightened. David Shields' book was, 20 years ago, and he's talking about, and he actually talked about this rags to riches story and about, in an anecdotal sense, about going to a TV show taping with Oprah, and how Oprah's one of those sort of quote unquote real people, because, her weight loss and weight gain and is
highly explored through years of her shows.
Right. But is one of these people that's flawed, right? And you can see yourself becoming
and that
star
makes
like her.
Celebrity culture more dangerous because we now know they have flaws. And so my flaws, no matter how big or small they are, means that I have the right to be a celebrity too.
But, Donald Trump and everything else, but social media and the media landscape in 2017, all narcissism and the idea, Andy Warhol's idea of everybody be famous for 15 minutes.
Look at the language it's applied.
Absolutely drives so much of the attention economy and the actual economy.
Well, I mean, and it's also ownership of the individual self. So MySpace, YouTube. I mean, it's always implied that it's got to be me inside this technology.
Yeah.
And its appeals for social networking is that I will be the center of the world, like the...
How many likes? How many likes?
The sadly recently deceased Mark Fisher, the Marxist and writer, had said, that smartphones have become fundamentally individualized command centers. So when I stare at my phone, it's all about me. Like all the apps that I want to see, all the people I want to contact.
I think we, at least the states, we're all adrift in this hazy daydream about being famous. Really, and if that isn't apparent, I don't I don't know what the fuck is.
Oh,
It's like breathing. It's just
what are my likes? You know,
Yeah.
people. I mean, and Tomoko and other friends and family, we make jokes about the Facebook likes. We almost all of us that engage in social networking, check that original post to see were there new comments,
right. And
likes.
so many friends, folks that from our cohort, our age, either have to take breaks from it.
Yeah.
Right. They have to go on a diet away from social media,
digital diet,
right?
Or social networking,
or
diet.
just drop off of them altogether. I actually don't. I mean, I use it a lot for things like projects like this and for art projects and things, but I don't have you can't really find me on. social media.
I use Facebook quite heavily, but I use it for activism, which I think is kind of strange. And
Yeah, but you just said you reported how many likes you had.
Exactly.
You know
No,
this sort of
but even
dopamine charge.
Well, that's the whole thing. Even with an activist culture, is the desire for celebrity for being an activist.
Yeah.
Because that's another belief circle.
Even
it's a belief circle.
Even this
podcast
this project
is a narcissistic
is poisoned by this idea of celebrity. Right? This is not that we have any illusion that we're even good at it, or
But
that
the
that'll
idea-
but the idea that that's possible. Fuck me. This is like
if we were to get this equipment for this and do this podcast with having 3 people listen to it, we wouldn't do this. So it's already built in a kind of delusion of grandeur that we will have followers and they'll like us and give us likes. So I think it's endemic of our culture.
I don't know how you do really have any sort of ambition in the world according to the rules of the game without that. Like, I don't know how to. This is probably my own psychosis, but I don't know how to pursue any project without it being poisoned by that to some degree. At least any public project.
I think that you can see people reject
some
this
granola
to
in the
some degree.
morning.
So, for instance, I can see millennials using social networking far less and in very different ways than Generation X and baby boomers. So I find quite frequently that baby boomers and Gen Xers use Facebook much more than my millennial students and students that I know they're a millennial generation because they're worried about their privacy.
Perhaps.
And we'll get to that with the circle.
Perhaps we may have experienced a certain
Plateau.
crest, not a plateau. I don't think if things go the way that they're going, we're not even close to that. But I think actually, I was thinking of the film Idiocracy, Mike Judge's film.
Yeah.
And
the cult.
this is sort of an aside, but there was Macho Camacho.
Yeah, Macho Camacho.
President.
Yeah.
There was some stupid thing on the internet, some meme thing on one of the.
There's a Facebook meme where they look for photos of matching Idiocracy when the film.
Well, there's
was made
that,
in
but there was also
2005.
this thing on like BuzzFeed or some stupid thing that was like a little quiz. It was like, who said it, Donald Trump or Macho Camacho?
yeah.
And you went through all these ridiculous things that were just like outrageous. And then the joke was at the end is like, actually, Donald Trump said all of them. It wasn't Macho Camacho.
And then there was, of course, a talk when the campaign was happening that Macho Camacho and the folks that made Idiocracy and Mike Judge were actually going to run
Terry Crews.
where they were going to run commercials to try to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president.
Where they'd get Terry Crews to do that character?
Well, yeah, and they were gonna do commercials to try to stop Donald
that
Trump's.
happen?
No,
I guess we'll have to.
it was actively discussed. I don't even think it had anything with Hillary Clinton, but the people that were so frightened by Donald Trump's rise were the writers, Mike Judge and the actors who had made that film and then watched this Donald Trump campaign take off, and they actually did think about running commercials against Donald Trump where he would reprise the role and where they would reenact some of the sequences with Donald Trump as an added in value. So that tells you the degree at which that's a prophetic text.
Absolutely. I think that, you question whether or not celebrity is an idea of a similar weight and as close to the roots as these other two that we've discussed, religion and capitalism.
I think it's more symptom to a deeper destruction, a deeper system desire for distraction.
Perhaps, but I guess here's how I think of it anyways. If you imagine yourself as John Lennon for a moment, you're as big as Jesus.
And then get your records kicked around by protesters.
I just don't need to put that in because another reference to
I'm more famous than Jesus.
Yeah.
The Beatles are more famous than Jesus.
Well, another sort of reference to religion and recognition by him. You know, he probably recognized the poison that was this system of celebrity. But anyways, if you imagine that we could get rid of religion and that we could get rid of capitalism, we have to say for all of these is that you can get rid of those structures and the signs of them. Like we could, if you had a world where no one identified as adhering to any particular religion, there were no organized religions, and there was no economic system that was like capitalism, there would still be these ideas, the roots of hierarchy imprinted in our DNA, in the cultural DNA. Those are still there. So that's a whole other problem. Like how
Fragments
do we get
and echoes of those.
right? How do we get rid of the imprint in our genetic code that these things have established? So that aside, right? We want to talk about that and how
we wash
what
that out
means.
generationally.
Right, because it's one thing to get rid of the institutions and the practices around the institutions. Another thing altogether than to get rid of its echo, right? But I imagine you could have a world, theoretically, where you got rid of those two things, but you could still very well have this third religion, this third incarnation of a system that imposes hierarchy that could be celebrity, the worship of other individuals.
Another deity, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think this is some of the questions that you posed to me about this idea was that how could, and the problem with thinking about how could there be a world without fame is like, how would you know Radiohead or how would you know a great artist?
This is the interesting thing, because if we're talking about transhumanism, technological adaptation, and brain augmentation, we like to think about artists as what was called the famous, if you're talented, there's the famous 10,000 hour rule or 100,000 hour rule.
Yeah, from
that
Malcolm Gladwell
it's not
talks
just genetic;
about
it's also
Blink.
just extensive practice.
Sorry, outliers.
Yeah, outliers, exactly. Well, what if we have brain augmentation? What if we have superhuman intelligence where humans are adapted in a way where they're connected to the internet neurologically, they're uplinked, they have the augmentations to the brain through nanotechnology. Suddenly, talent is kind of just omnipresent among humans. Would that kind of get rid of celebrity culture?
I think you're going down a different road a little bit there.
But just
I mean, you're I think you're concerned about this notion. And this, I think
I'm talking about how you would get rid of it.
I know, but
get rid of it.
I know, but I think
technology.
what I'm hearing is a sort of reflection of like how you described your idea of celebrity and your idea of how you would be famous as this this value in labor, right? And you're still associating that as this core thing that I think is an idiosyncratic thing about your idea.
Well, we should talk about this. So the hierarchy within celebrity, I think, still is dominant. That there's a general, I think overall, you could like Kim Kardashian, you could like this YouTube star that puts cinnamon in her mouth with a whole spoonful. You could like those people, but at the end of the day, I think most people would agree they would respect Meryl Streep or Daniel Day-Lewis more, or George Clooney or Brad Pitt, so people that actually have talent. Rather than put cinnamon in their mouth.
But why do we have to worship them? You could be the most talented fucking writer in the world, but why do I have to fucking worship you?
Yeah,
why do you need the eyeballs and the love and the adoration and the worship of so many people? Why isn't it possible to have a world where you are extremely talented at something, but aren't worshipped the world over?
Or that you're worshipped for a equal amount of time among a data system or technology where
perhaps
they mete out your fame for literally 15 minutes in your life. You're famous for 15 minutes. And we all equally be famous for 15 minutes.
If you can create a platform, so here's a $1 billion idea for you, Matt. If you can create a platform, create an algorithm that will guarantee that every person on the planet gets 15 actual minutes of fame during their life. You could join that club. Those 8.
Well,
you could join the Mark Zuckerberg club. But why do we have to be enthralled? So here's the thing.
It's because fundamentally we're not getting the nutrition of what we actually really need, is belonging in smaller social circles, belonging in our communities.
Right, and I want to get back to that in a second, because I also think it ties back to mental health, to my mental health, specifically, but I think broadly to mental health. What I'm trying to argue for is that this idea, celebrity, fame, the worship of other individuals in the world, you can imagine it being dislocated, right? Just as you could imagine capitalism being sort of, even though it, as we try to argue, has its roots in religious structures and is largely informed by the systems of hierarchy built in religion, that it could be, you can imagine it being dislocated, right? And the world being entirely secular and could still go on, right? It could still replicate itself. It could still eat up the world and destroy us all. I feel like celebrity has that same possibility, that it could be dislocated from these other sort of deeper causes, these deeper structures, but could still go on to become a thing that enables all kinds of forms of hierarchy, right? When you have the worship, when you have this sort of magical thinking that the idea, your ideal form exists somewhere else, right? And this whole mythology.
This gets back to not just celebrity or wanting to be famous, but the fundamental desire, we could argue, that humans want to worship something. So does that desire to worship, can that be rerouted to other needs, other more basic needs that we're covering up through celebrity culture, through entertainment? Remember David Foster Wallace, the amazing speech he gave at Kenyon College. He said, we all worship something at the end of the day.
It's a good point, but I don't where's the evidence for that?
Well, I'm not going to run a statistical model in the bathroom of your place. I'm just saying.
I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just not well informed here. But I don't know where the
worship yourself is part of, or want to be worshipped is part of celebrity culture.
You can talk about love and caring and connection and social bonds and all of these things, right? We can talk about these things and where these are located and how these are part of human culture and our evolution. But worship outside of being directly connected with
I am not talking about worship as a religious circumstance. I'm talking the way the secular view that David Foster Wallace has, which is that ultimately we have values and we worship some of these values, and they may be institutionally arranged through entertainment or through church.
I see that. I may be totally off. So somebody write in and correct us here. But I don't see worship as a part of the human condition, as an innate part of the human condition. Like it's not like our biology. It seems to be an emergent behavior within social structures.
Well, and the term worship means a most uncritical obsession with something, or just a disconnected need to follow something rather than yourself or other things.
I don't know. I don't need no gods.
Okay, let's get back to where we had perhaps our best discussion on celebrity culture, and you provided a really powerful semiotic, symbolic critique of a show we saw in Orange County somewhere. I think
Father John Misty.
Father John Misty.
Yeah, we went to
at the what was the music venue? It was in Orange County.
The Observatory in Orange County. Yeah.
Costa Mesa.
Costa Mesa.
Exactly. And we've talked about this in the past, and you had noticed as we were lining up, because I mistakenly only bought one ticket and thought it was a great deal, and then I realized I needed to buy another ticket, and thankfully I found another ticket. Otherwise, we would not been able to see the show or whatever. But maybe that show ended up not being really important. Yeah,
because missed out on seeing
it was his least interesting performance that I saw, and it wasn't even a really good one. It was very hammy. And when I saw him at Coachella, it was a very toned down, a serious, none of the jibber jabber or a crotch grabbing that he had with the show at the Observatory. But when we were leaving, I think you talked about the line that we were in, because the line that we were in was basically like we were cows lining up with these metal fences. Yeah. We were being lined like cattle to go see a show and worship someone on a stage. Yeah. And you'd profoundly said that we were basically like livestock going in to celebrate this person and what they do, but not celebrate anything we're seeing in our own lives or people we love. Yeah. And that we're going to spend a lot of money to worship somebody else. And that if you actually look at the stage, the way the venue's designed, the fact that you're lining up like cows
Right.
to get serviced.
This idea of worship is religious, but also then it becomes about celebrity. Informs the architecture of our spaces that we inhabit.
And I asked you, well, what would be the antidote? And I was saying, would this be friends, like an open mic at someone's living room?
Or like, what would be the alternative?
What
right?
would be the alternative of having art that wasn't hierarchical?
I think the next time you go into a theater, to a performance, to a show of with somebody with all the lights on them up in front of a big audience at Coachella, or go see a stand-up comedy show or whatever, just think about the architecture of the space and what that means, what the shape of the theater means in terms of hierarchical social relations. It's just so.
Father John Misty makes good music, in my opinion. He's a great lyricist.
Yeah, okay.
He's a great lyricist. If you just listen to his new album, Pure Entertainment, comedy, these are really well wrought, well thought out, philosophical songs that are rich and they're interesting and compelling. And he has actual ideas, and he doesn't want it just to be common currency for something that you use while you're bathing. And the idea is, if Father John Misty were to reconstruct his art, how would it be reconstructed?
If he were to perform in a reconstructed
world? How could he erase his celebrity identity but also still make that art?
Well, here's a tricky part of moving from these things, these three ideas, moving from the world as it is now into a world differently designed. There has to be transitional moments, long periods of transition. And likely won't see someone who is famous now if the culture can evolve in a way that celebrity is no longer part of its DNA, that we have a different dynamics and different power structures for social relations, that you actually may not see the transformation of a famous person into a not famous person. That's probably just not going to be part of the path.
But we do know that there's celebrities that are famous that can really disappear over time. You know, Clark Gable. That's true. Clark Gable didn't last like Jimmy Stewart, and because he didn't change with the times like Jimmy Stewart did. And so you can see artists that were really great for a while, like, you know, the one-hit musicians where you can't even see them in the street. So the interesting idea is, if they're good artists, if they're interesting artists, is it unethical to let them be on that pedestal? But it's also unethical to deny them the ability to express themselves.
Well, here's where we get to peeking around the corner. I think peeking around the bend to our next set of ideas that we want to talk about, series of things that we want to talk about on the podcast, which are solution.
Yeah,
and we do this all the time. You and I do this, and that's part of what we want to try to do on the podcast is imagine a world where actually nobody needs to. Nobody has a cost of living. You don't have to worry about paying your bills.
Post-scarcity society,
yeah,
like Murray Bookchin talked about in many of his works.
So if we think about if the future that we want is a world that's a post-scarcity world that is full of human flourishing, that provides for the basic needs of all of humanity, and doesn't leave folks for want, why do you need to be worshipped anymore?
Oh, no, I'm not saying we should actually. I should wind that back by saying I'm not saying there's statistical evidence that worship is.
Everybody should have the freedom to make music.
Oh no, but I agree.
Father John Misty should have the freedom to make music as much as he desires to.
But when there is a segregation of talent, when there literally is,
right,
there just is.
Yeah,
I mean, there are going to be more people that will take up or want to listen to him than others.
I think what you're having a hard time with is imagining how do you value something and it not be part of this equation.
Well, I do believe worship is a very connotative word. So when David Foster Wallace uses it, he's saying that when we worship things, that there's things that we love and that we value. And I'm not saying that it has to be constructed based on leader worship or celebrity, but there's nothing wrong with worshiping values. I don't think worshiping has to be entirely pejorative, but if an artist is an artist, and I agree. I mean, I think the problem is that artist is this rare little sheep in the corner that get to have a richer, richer life
today.
Yeah,
but what if we're
future,
all?
No, oh yeah, absolutely. And in fact, with AI, the most interesting thing and the most sustaining thing for humans will be art making.
Right.
I mean,
what if we're all capable of the same kind of artistic fulfillment, creative potential as any artist that you enjoy?
I think if we're able to survive and transition out of capitalism, if we're able to survive out of religion and the institutional pressures of that, I think, once again, surplus time, no work, universal basic income, a lot of people were doing many, many artistic things that they weren't able to do.
And it not being contingent upon, as we are now, on attention.
Or monopoly, where people get to monopolize artistic talent. Right. And this is the case you can see with these quote-unquote genius child prodigies for pianos, is the training, especially among wealthier, well-to-do families that have the means to get the specialists. There is more and more of these genius prodigy pianists. And the interesting thing is they're not as interesting in the classical music world as they used to be because they're so frequent. There's so many of them. And so that's an example of what happens when the tools for talent become so multiplied that the value of someone famous is not as interesting anymore. Right. It doesn't have the same hold. And so by multiplying the talent in our society, giving people, free labor power, giving people time to actually be creative, it might be the case where there's just so much talent that it just becomes, you just go to the local coffee shop because that person's just as good as anyone else.
It could organically, given the potentials for advancement of technology,
and surplus time,
if they're paired with social and economic advances or transformations, this idea of celebrity could sort of dissipate into the ether.
And brain, that's what I'm saying, is the multiplicity of it. And that's why you were laughing at this idea, but brain augmentation is part of that, because the neurological connections, when you look at artists in their brains, they have tighter neurological complex matrices and parts of the brain that's producing the art. And so let's say, it's the Matrix and you put in a tape and you instantly become a martial arts guru. Well, this might happen at some point with brain augmentation. So it's multiplicities of factors make celebrities irrelevant, because surplus time, the ability to engage in the artwork, and then the fact that it's so many-factored among the population that it would obliterate the need for celebrities, because you could see your neighbor who's just as talented as someone in New Hampshire.
As long as celebrity is tied to talent, right?
Or would we even use the term talent because it's so omnipresent?
Right. So anyways, it could radically change with technological advances. But I think overall, I wanted to couch this and place this idea in relation to these others. And I wanted to argue for the significance of it and the weight of this as a serious thing, because I think if you really look at it, celebrity is another form of imposing systems of hierarchy, magical thinking, delusions of impossible futures, just like these other two, but also poses the threat of
global extinction.
Right, but potentially being able to stand on its own as a machine to replicate systems of hierarchy moving forward.
Well,
and therefore needs to be dismantled and
expunged, washed away generationally,
put into the dustbin.
Well, and as I said, I tie this more deeper and fundamentally to the addiction of narrative, and celebrities are part of that structure. So for me, what's causing the most harm is that when people do have surplus time, they're escaping to other narratives. And we have to talk about the ecological, social, and economic consequences.
If you do have time,
narrative.
Posting pictures on Instagram and hoping to become...
Well, if people are spending 20 hours a week watching TV, that's 20 hours less organizing, 20 hours less mobilizing, 20 hours less dreaming of solutions.
Yeah, that's true now, but I don't...
See, this is the difference. This is the difference about celebrity.
Sure.
It's my analogy of the rope. It's not going down deep enough because people worship celebrities, and it affects our psychology, affects our self-esteem, It affects what we think of. We think of ourselves and others, and it creates these really raw, gross judgments of each other that we don't need in a utopian society.
Right.
But also, the time that we're using for it and obsessing about is time we're not using for transitioning out of capitalism.
Well, that's true today. But, okay, if it's not far enough down the rope, like what's further down the rope? Isn't it these other things that we've talked about?
Well, it's the nihilism that my agency can't affect political and economic change, but I can become famous. So I can use my individual. There's a belief that my individual time can be made to make me famous.
I know, but if you're saying celebrity as an idea isn't far enough down the rope, meaning it's not really a root cause of
our addiction to narrative is. The complex technological matrix.
I know, but I think again you're mentioning something that is an emergent behavioral thing. This addiction to narrative is an emergent behavioral thing, not a.
For me, celebrities are the glittering parts of the peacock on the feather in the back.
I know, and I think that's why
I'm
folks
being shit on by the peacock.
I know, but I think that's why people, academics like yourself, who worship individuals like Karl Marx or whomever, right? Like
academics aren't the only that worship individuals.
I know, but that's why you have this sort of flippant attitude towards this idea of celebrity as a serious thing.
It is, but we're not using our time to watch only celebrities on TV.
And very few people
that's
are.
My point.
But it doesn't make it less.
My point, and let's jab at you and I with this.
Okay.
My point is, I'm not watching House of Cards or Master of None because I want to see the celebrity.
Nor am I. Yeah.
I'm not wearing a diaper to watch all episodes of Game of Thrones, right? Where people are getting bludgeoned by an axe, but I'm shitting my pants.
That was a thing in Idiocracy, right?
Yeah.
It was like
something
you can kick them in the balls.
The fact that in Idiocracy that the toilet is the love chair. You can literally shit and eat popcorn.
The lazy boy.
Your juice is connected to your head, and so you literally don't have to get up out of your chair. And I think that is the thing: is the addiction to narrative, and that art and entertainment provide addictive, trapezoid, fascinating, compelling, diaphanous distractions that we fundamentally use as escape hatches from transforming the physical world. And so my opinion is the celebrities are the fancy feathers on the peacock. They get us on there, but I'm still being shit on the peacock, right? Because I can't stop staring at it. And that technology has made narrative so compelling, so submersive. Video games, TV, our social networking that also are constructed as narratives. They're so addictive. They're so interactive, so participatory that we are escaping, right? Like R2D and C-3PO out of the hatch.
Right.
And instead of actually confronting the material emergency of now, that we have the North Pole, which will release a huge amount of carbon and methane, that will also release viruses we haven't even seen before, prehistoric, and that the Great Barrier Reef is 22% gone, and that every day we don't actually mobilize to save a dying Earth. And so we escape instead into these complex systems of narrative that are narcotic.
No, I agree entirely.
So to me, that's the deep structure. I think celebrities are the flashing part of the larger problem, which is the time usage. That if we worship things, and this is the part about worshiping, if I'm going to worship and brag about my Netflix streaming on my Facebook, but I'm not going to brag about what I did for activism, that's both wanting to be adored, but one is at least trying to materially change things, right?
Yeah.
You want to connect someone because I want to talk about Game of Thrones and have a Facebook thread on that. But if someone like me could be quite guilty of saying, look, I want to be adored for doing this important activism, please like my post. That at least has a material consequence that's a net benefit.
I get you. I'm with you there altogether. I think why I'm so passionate about that, because I just think it should be taken seriously, and we don't take it seriously enough. And I think as long as we can take it seriously enough to address it in meaningful ways, so that we can move beyond it, I'm all for that.
And those celebrities are the engine for those narratives.
And right, exactly. Leonardo DiCaprio. And
Yeah. And I want to see all of their films that come out. And I want to have a conversation about their oeuvre as an actor, right? And then if I miss, and even for me, artist, intellectual, educated person, overstuffed, overeducated, I've got to see this next film from this major director because I will be missing a narrative.
Right. Well, and I think the essential part of my argument is that if we do all these other things that we need to do to save ourselves and to save the planet, but forget to address this idea, we're still going to be screwed.
Yeah. We're going to be way off from where we want. And that's so saying that when we're looking at this podcast we're developing, it seems pretty dystopian. But we want to talk about the parts
we want to turn the
need
corner.
to be taken out of the mixtape.
Right.
And so our next episodes will hopefully talk about stuff that needs to be put in or made sure to be in the mixtape.
But we felt we had to lay some groundwork here in terms of what things aren't in this mixtape.
To create a real Brave New World,
right?
Not the Brave New World.
Exactly. So we better wrap it up here, and to help us wrap it up this week, we have a outro from a coworker, colleague, and friend of mine, the soon-to-be famous Cab Washington.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, and visit us at thefutureisamixtape.com. I want the future to be an amazing place, way better than the past has been. And any way that we can do that, whether it's a mixtape or anything else, I will be really happy forever, or at least until I die. And my kids will be happy, and their kids will be happy. So thank you.
And thank you, Cab. Great outro.
Thank you so much.
So again, thanks to Cab.
Thanks,
I think
Jess.
we wandered a little bit on that discussion, but I think it was ultimately very, very productive. And we would like to hear what you think about this and agreement us about not including other things in this poison pyramid. And so
that's what the chat comments are about, is like what you missed because you should have got everything done in that hour.
Right. Again, it's only an hour in each of these, so we're trying to keep that. We're a little bit longer this time, but hopefully that's all right. But let us know. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/thefutureisamixtape. Find us on Twitter. It's @futuremixtapes. You can sign up for our newsletter, our weekly email with little goodies and notice about the latest episodes if you go to the website. And you'll also find there some references to some of the books we mentioned and show notes. And anything else you want to say, Matt? Thank you for listening. If anybody's listening to this,
I think I need to take up transcendental meditation after this.
I feel like all of these are like, we're just putting messages in bottles and we're going to throw them out to the sea. And
I will love to see what aliens think when they dig up our carcasses. They will say, what happened? Oh, they pleasured themselves to death.
Well, we hope this hour gave you pleasure. Catch you next time.